Imagine this. You wake up one morning and an entire family, uh, 3 generations, just gone in this incredibly chilling, really inexplicable way. That's what we're digging into today. The Burari deaths case from North Delhi. It's infamous. We're going to walk through the source material, pull some insights from the Burari deaths, a family's shared delusion, and try to piece together not just the facts, which are stark enough, but also the psychological theories, the cultural stuff that might have been swirling around this really rare, devastating event. Our mission really is to guide you through it all so you can get properly informed about a case that just, well, it stunned the whole nation.
Yeah, it really did. And from the very start, you could tell this wasn't just, a straightforward crime story. It's got so many layers. There's the human psychology, the family dynamics, the cultural context. It all makes it one of the most, frankly, unsettling mysteries out there. There's a depth here that goes way beyond what those first headlines could capture.
Absolutely. And that initial discovery, wow. So we're talking July 1st, 2018, in Sanagar, Burari, North Delhi. 11 members of one family, the Chundawat family, also known as Bhatia, found dead. And it wasn't just a couple of people. It was, like you said, 3 generations, ages from, what, 15?
15, yeah, all the way up to around 80 years old.
Just staggering. And the scene itself, horrific. 10 of them, including teenage boys, found hanging from an iron mesh ceiling, blindfolded, mouths taped, hands tied.
And what immediately made it even stranger, another layer of just weirdness, was the grandmother, Narayani Devi. She was maybe 77, 80 years old, found strangled, lying on her bed, so separate from the others. And then there was the dog, their pet dog, chained up on the terrace, apparently really distressed. It just adds to that whole eerie silence of the scene.
Right, and as the neighbors who found them, they noticed the family's routine was broken. Like the grocery store they ran didn't open at 5 a.m., which it always did. That's what made them worry. The front door was open, so they went in, made the awful discovery, called the police. It really shows how, tight-knit that community was.
Yeah.
A small change raised alarms. Okay, so the scene itself is already deeply disturbing, but then the police find something that just takes this into truly bizarre territory. 11 diaries. Mysterious diaries.
Yeah, and not just random notes. These things spanned a decade, from 2007 right up to 2018. Meticulously kept. Chillingly specific, really detailed instructions for rituals. And here's the kicker. The instructions described exactly how they should tie their hands, tape their mouths, even hang in specific groups. And it matched precisely how the bodies were found. Every detail.
Wow. And wasn't there one entry that was particularly haunting?
Yes. Something like, everyone will tie their own hands, and when the kriya, that's the ritual, is done, everyone will help each other untie them.
Help each other untie them. That phrase, it hits hard. Because it implies, it implies they didn't think they were going to die, right?
Exactly. That's the core paradox. They expected to survive this.
So how do we even begin to understand that, this fatal miscalculation?
Well, the investigation figured out who was writing the stuff down. It was Priyanka and Neetu, 2 of the women in the family. But the voice, the instructions themselves, they were allegedly coming from Lalit.
Lalit. Okay, that brings us to him. He seems absolutely central to this.
Completely pivotal.
So let's dig into Lalit a bit. His father, Bhopal Singh, died back in 2007. And apparently Lalit changed after that, became more withdrawn.
Yeah, that's the story. He became more introverted. And it was around then he started making these claims.
Claims about?
That he was possessed by his dead father's spirit, and that this spirit was communicating through him.
Right. And the diaries connect back to this.
Directly. Forensic work, handwriting analysis, it all pointed to Lalit orchestrating the rituals. Priyanka and Neetu were basically just scribes, writing down what Lalit, or rather the spirit, was dictating.
That's incredible. So the police initially treated it as murder, understandably.
Of course. The scene looked like mass murder.
But as this diary evidence and Lalit's story came out, the investigation shifted.
It did, quite dramatically. It moved towards this idea of a suicide pact.
Driven by what, psychologically?
The main theory, and the one that ultimately led to the case being closed, is shared psychotic disorder. It's also called folie à deux, or induced delusional disorder.
Right, I've heard of that. It's where one dominant person's delusion kind of infects others close to them.
Precisely. It's very rare, especially on this scale involving so many people across generations, but it fits the known facts here. Someone, in this case Lalit, has a delusion believing he's channeling his father, receiving instructions for salvation or prosperity through rituals. And because of the close-knit family structure, maybe isolation, maybe other factors, the rest of the family comes to believe it too. Implicitly.
And they followed these ritual instructions, believing it would lead to something good, not death.
That seems to be the tragic conclusion. So, yeah, the Delhi police formally closed the case in June 2022, ruled a ritual suicide pact. No evidence of foul play found.
But, okay, let's zoom out a bit. Beyond the immediate crime scene, the diaries, the psychology, what about the bigger picture? The cultural context? Does that play a role here?
Experts think so, yeah. There was a psychological review in 2022 that highlighted things like collectivism in Indian society, where the group's harmony and reputation often comes before individual needs or doubts, and also this idea of internalized family secrecy.
How does that connect?
Well, in that kind of environment, conformity can be really strong. It might make it much harder for someone inside the family to question the dominant person, in this case, Lali, or the strange things happening. Doubts might be suppressed to maintain family unity or avoid shame. It could potentially amplify a shared delusion.
That makes sense. And it also touches on something else you mentioned earlier, unaddressed trauma.
Right. Experts pointed out that families like the Chundawats might carry significant trauma. Lily himself had some accidents in the past. There might have been other unspoken issues. But perhaps, due to cultural norms or lack of awareness, they didn't seek professional mental health support.
Which could leave them vulnerable.
Exactly. That lack of intervention, that silence around trauma or mental distress, some argue it could create fertile ground for developing these intense, almost cult-like rituals rooted in superstition, maybe a kind of spiritual desperation to fix things or gain control when other avenues seem closed off.
It really raises big questions about societal support for mental health, doesn't it? Especially when cultural factors might make it harder to ask for help.
It absolutely does.
And the public reaction, I mean, this case was huge in India and even internationally.
Oh, massive. Nonstop media coverage. It sparked so many conversations.
In documentaries, too, right? Like that Netflix one, House of Secrets.
Yeah, House of Secrets, the Burari deaths came out in October 2021. Really brought the whole chilling story to a global audience. Plus, countless news reports trying to make sense of it all.
But even with the official conclusion, there's still doubt.
For some, yes. You still hear from locals, even some relatives, who just can't fully accept the suicide pact ruling. They feel like maybe something was missed, maybe there was foul play involved somehow.
That lingering uncertainty.
It speaks to how profoundly disturbing the whole thing is. And there's another angle, too, from psychological autopsies.
Which suggested what?
That the deaths might genuinely have been accidental. Not murder, not even intentional suicide in the typical sense, but an accident that happened during the ritual.
Connecting back to that diary entry.
Yeah.
That they expected to be untied, they thought they'd survive it.
Exactly. That maybe the ritual went wrong in a way they never anticipated.
Yeah, the house today. What's the situation there?
It's deserted, empty. But it still casts a long shadow over the neighborhood. There's still a lot of local superstitions surrounding it. People nearby sometimes blaming minor illnesses or bad luck on some kind of lingering spiritual residue.
Wow. Just shows the deep psychological scar this left. So, bringing this all together, what are the key takeaways for you listening to this deep dive? Why does grappling with Burari matter?
Well, first, just the sheer rarity of it. A 3-generation event like this, tied so deeply to these kinds of spiritual beliefs, it's almost unheard of globally. It really forces you to confront how extreme human behavior can become under certain, perhaps unique psychological and social pressures.
And second, it's just such a stark, tragic reminder about mental health. It screams for the need for awareness, for early intervention, especially within families dealing with trauma or potential delusional disorders, before things can possibly escalate.
Definitely. And third, the cultural dimension is crucial. It's a powerful, if devastating, example of how deeply ingrained traditions, family hierarchy, and maybe a collectivist tendency to suppress dissent can inadvertently create an environment where shared delusions can take root and flourish.
So yeah, the Burari deaths. It's still one of India's most haunting stories.
Yeah.
So elusive, so tragic, so many layers. Officially closed as a ritual suicide pact driven by shared psychosis. But the questions, the unease, they definitely linger.
And maybe that's the final thought to leave you with. Just consider how deeply things like cultural norms, that pressure for family secrecy, and untreated psychological pain can twist together, how they can build a shared reality that feels so real, so compelling to those inside it, that it leads to utter devastation. Even when they believe they were on a path to safety or salvation, it really makes you ask, what is the true cost of silence, of conformity, when mental health is pushed aside?